Agreed. Now we're going to proceed to consideration of the Irish Sign Language for the Deaf Community Bill 2016. And I want to, we're awaiting the arrival of the Minister of State at the Department of Health, Deputy Finian McGrath. Was you shocked? Wasting parliamentary business time. Minister, do you want to conclude on these particular amendments? Yeah, just. Are you a whole lot more? Yeah, are you finished? Yeah, well, we'll hear you, Deputy Byrne. We can come back to the Minister.
Well, I just make. Yeah, I was indicating to you before you said the time was up, and I suppose that. Okay.
We're talking about the tenure, sorry. As students are not employees, I had said that, then their time within the institution is by definition limited. This includes the right of free expression. Any claim that this right has been restricted, or indeed the fear that voicing a contrarian opinion would invite academic retribution, can better be challenged through the existing charters and policies which set out a detailed process for consideration and redress where necessary. I understand that such policies and processes have already been agreed with student representatives at local level and that they have been adopted formally by each of the academic councils. And then amendment number 23, submitted by Deputy Funchion, proposes changes in section 15 of the bill, which provides for the composition of the Academic Council of a technological university. And as I outlined during the committee stage debate, section 15 provides that the governing body of each technological university, including its student numbers, shall have the flexibility to decide the overall number of members that the Academic Council of the Technological University should have, including the number of students.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Byrne.
What I would say on the issue of academic freedom is that the concept of academic freedom, particularly for the staff of a third-level institution and a university and a technological university, is just so crucial and so important for democracy, for freedom of thought, and for the development of ideas and for social progress, that I think that to dilute the concept of the staff and academic freedom by inserting the student academic freedom that the members want to do, I think would be wrong. And I have to say, I would be, having considered it, I think we should vote against it in defence of not diluting staff academic freedom. Having said that, I've already said that Fianna Fáil would support a legislation in relation to the representation or the recognition, of students' union. And I think that the concept of student academic freedom could very well be explored as part of that, and I certainly would have no objection to doing it. But I think academic freedom is just so crucial to society that we shouldn't be amending it or shouldn't be giving a different regime to our technological universities than we have for the rest of our third-level institutions and universities. That I think that it's probably just premature to bring this in at the moment and should be the subject of separate legislation.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to contribute on this particular matter? I don't want to put the amendment at this point, because if I do, it's likely to impact on the time for commencement of the next. Yeah. Okay. Will somebody propose the adjournment then of the consideration of the bill before us? It's proposed. Yes, you're proposing the adjournment. So it's agreed that we're adjourning our consideration of the Technological Universities Bill. Okay, we'll move to the consideration of the Irish Sign Language Bill. Well, he should be here now. Sorry, we're about to start.
Is it?
Yeah, we're waiting for you. The second stage of this important bill be taken now. Is that agreed? Are you moving the motion, Deputy? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Over to you, Minister.
First of all, can I say at the outset that I'm delighted to be here again and delighted that we've been able to achieve a consensus on this bill in the Seanad. With very little work left for us to do in the Dáil to do before the bill can be referred on to the President for signature. I want to commend Senator Mark Daly and Fianna Fáil and members of the deaf community for all of the work that has been put into achieving that consensus. I particularly want to mention Grace Coyle, Senator Mark Daly's parliamentary assistant, for her dedication and perseverance and her endless patience in seeing this bill through to where we are today. I also want to commend Dáil Éireann and Jennifer O'Connell and my own advisor Jerry Maguire for their amazing and professional work. As I mentioned in the various Seanad debates, the government's approach to amending the bill is to keep and strengthen the three key features that need to be in legislation, to ensure that the important recognition by the state of ISL and the statement that users have the right to use it is retained, place a duty on public bodies to provide ISL interpretation at no cost to the user when access to statutory entitlements is sought by a person, and finally to provide a clear statutory right to use ISL in court proceedings. I'd also like to reiterate for the House that in response to the concerns raised by the deaf community, and I welcome you all here today for this very, very important debate, the commitments relating to ISL in the National Disability Inclusion Strategy, which I launched in July last, were strengthened. In addition to actions by providing for the extension of the ISL remote interpretation service to evenings and weekends, and supporting this legislation to ensure that all public bodies provide ISL users with free interpretation when accessing or availing of their statutory services. There is a new action which ensures that the Sign Language Interpretation Service, the SLIS, will be resourced to increase the number of trained sign language and deaf interpreters. A quality assurance and registration scheme for the interpreters will be established, and there will be ongoing professional training and development provided for the interpreters. I am also delighted, Ceann Comhairle, to confirm that an allocation of €227,000 in 2018 has been made available to SLIS via the Citizens Information Board for this work. We put a lot of work into improving the bill in the Seanad, and as I've said, we had very few amendments to consider here today. There is one substantive amendment that is proposed to the bill now following further discussions between myself and Senator Mark Daly. The bill has published in specific detail as to the number of hours per annum proposed that users of Irish Sign Language will be provided with an annual allocation of hours interpretation for non-public sector purposes, to include GP visits, social and cultural activities. This level of detail and prescription is not appropriate to primary legislation, and this point was accepted by Senator Mark Daly in the negotiations. And again, I want to thank him for his cooperation on this. While the Senator agreed to the deletion of this provision, Section 7 of the bill as published in the Seanad, this was on the basis that we would consider the issue further in the Dáil. I accept the argument that sign language users suffer extreme social isolation, and I totally accept that argument from the deaf community and from Senator Mark Daly. Provision of support so they can visit the GP and engage in social and cultural activities, etc., would be a humane and worthwhile initiative to combat this isolation and improve well-being and mental health. However, this cannot be regulated in terms of detailed prescription of annual numbers of hours of primary legislation as was originally proposed. I am delighted to confirm that I have secured the agreement of the Minister for Employment Affairs and Social Protection for the provision in principle of funding to the Irish Sign Language Services in this regard. The intention for 2018 is to develop guidelines as envisaged in Amendment number 15. SLIS, working with its founder, the Citizens Information Board, will be tasked with scoping out how a model for such a scheme would operate and preparing draft guidelines for consideration and approval by the Minister for Employment and Social Protection. The intention, subject to the progress of this work, is to aim to trial an approach towards the end of 2018, and to this end, a sum of 50,000 may be made available from within existing resources to meet any pilot project costs incurred towards the end of 2018. Following the learning from the pilot, more detailed proposals and revised guidelines will be developed, which will inform future annual funding requirements, subject to the consent of the Minister for Public Expenditure Reform in the normal way. The Office of the Parliamentary Counsel has examined the text of the amendment suggested originally by Senator Mark Daly and advises that it should be recast as per Amendment number 15. Senator Mark Daly and I engaged in further discussions, and this amendment is now an agreed amendment. As agreement has been reached on an approach to the funding, and this is the remaining issue outstanding, and as the issue is a very real one for the deaf community, I am happy to present this amendment by agreement. In addition, the Office of Parliamentary Counsel has advised that a number of technical amendments should be made to the bill as passed by the Seanad. And these include moving a regulation-making power, adding new public bodies from Section 2 definitions to a substantive section of the bill, a technical recasting of Section 5, regulations in relation to notice to be given by a user of Irish Sign Language seeking to avail of free interpretation services and ancillary matters, an internal reorganisation of Section 9, review of the Act, and changing the name of the bill to Irish Sign Language Act 2017 as a crisper and more friendly short title. These all have been discussed, and I hope that we will be able to agree with them at committee stage. In conclusion, at this time of year, I think it's appropriate to reflect on the significant amount of progress that has been made over the last 12 months in relation to disability issues. The Task Force on Personalised Budgets, which I launched in 2016, will report to me very shortly on the personalised budgets model, which gives people with disabilities more control in accessing health-funded personal social services, giving them greater independence and greater choice in accessing services which best meet their individual needs. The task force is an important part of the process of progressing the government's objective to provide services and supports to people with disabilities, which will enable them to have greater independence in accessing the services they choose and improve their ability to tailor the support required to meet their needs and plan their lives. And this is a very important issue in relation to choice and equality for all citizens. In April of this year, the Make Pay report was launched, and many of its 24 recommendations are already being actively advanced by all of the departments. In some cases, the government has gone beyond the recommendations of the report in support of people with disabilities. For example, the report identified transport as being critically important for people with disabilities considering returning to work. On foot of this recommendation, it was decided that a person in receipt of a long-term disability payment can retain their free travel pass for 5 years. In Budget 2018, I secured an increase in the allocation for disability services so that this figure is now €1.763 billion. This is up from €1.688 billion in 2017. and as a result of my securing an additional funding of €92 million for disability services in 2017, this year saw the allocation of an additional €10 million for the provision of services for 1,500 young people leaving school and rehabilitative training this year. The development of alternative respite models with the €1 million targeted funding, the reconfiguration of residential services supported by €20 million in capital funding, and to be further supported by the Service Reform Fund, and quality improvements to increase compliance with the national standards for residential centres for children and adults with disabilities.
Excellent. Thank you, Minister. Deputy Murphy O'Mahony, please.
Thank you, Corla, and I'm sharing my time with Deputies O'Loughlin and Brown, if that's okay. Fianna Fáil is delighted to support and indeed initiate the recognition of Irish Sign Language for the Deaf Community Bill 2017. This is a hugely significant day for the deaf community, as this legislation will empower them by placing Irish Sign Language on a statutory basis. It is a massive advance for their civil and indeed human rights. With this bill, the state will recognise the right of the Irish Sign Language users to use Irish Sign Language as their native language. Designating sign language as a native language will empower the deaf community by permitting it to be used in legal proceedings. It will also require the state to provide interpreting services for students who use Irish Sign Language. Importantly, it will also require public bodies to provide Irish Sign Language users with free interpretation when availing of or seeking to access statutory entitlements and services. This will make it easier for members of the deaf community to communicate with state institutions. This bill was originally put together by Senator Mark Daly, working with the Irish Deaf Society, including members of the deaf community and indeed some of them from my own county of Cork. It covers a wide range of topics, including the recognition of Irish Sign Language and the rights of the members of the deaf community. 3 times my party colleague, Senator Mark Daly, introduced Irish Sign Language legislation in the Seanad, and now, at the 3rd attempt, he has succeeded. I commend his persistence. I also wish to acknowledge the work done by Ms Grace Coyle, who works with Mark, and she worked very hard on this bill. As I said, the bill was put together with the Irish Deaf Society, which has been campaigning for over 30 years for the recognition of Irish Sign Language as a major aspect of equality for deaf people in Irish society. Irish Sign Language is the primary language of the deaf community in Ireland, and approximately 50,000 people communicate in Irish Sign Language. It is the native language of the deaf community, a visual language with its own unique grammar, and not only is it a language of the hands, but also of the face and the body. Up to now, it has had no official status in Irish legislation, and it has been a crucial objective of the Irish Deaf Society to get recognition. This week, that goal will be achieved. I hope that this legislation is just the start and not the end of this journey. What I particularly hope is that providing official recognition of the language, it will transform the lives of deaf people, but especially deaf children. Before I was elected to this House, I worked as a special need assistant, so I particularly welcome Section 5 of the bill, which provides educational support for deaf children. For in this, as in so much else, early intervention is critical. There is no reason that deaf children should not have the same educational outcomes that the rest of society has. Yet, for example, the proportion of deaf children who progress onto higher education is half the rate of the wider community. I hope that this bill can address issues like that. In the years ahead, we must closely monitor and evaluate the progress of young deaf people and be prepared, if necessary, to come back here and improve this legislation. Minister, I would also ask you to please work on core funding for the Irish Deaf Society. They do Trojan work. At Ceann Comhairle, I too am happy to commend this bill to the House, and I compliment the Minister on his work here, and I reiterate my congratulations to the Irish Deaf Society, many of whom are here today, and Senator Mark Daly for making this happen. Good.
Okay. Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. First of all, can I extend a very warm welcome to all of the members of the Deaf Society that are here with their families. It's a very proud day and a very significant day for all of you. And can I also welcome the fact that we have somebody in the press gallery as an interpreter. I was very, very frustrated one day when I was hoping to have a meeting with Eddie Redmond from the Irish Deaf Society, and the Houses of the Oireachtas could not and would not provide an interpreter, and hopefully with this bill that is all going to change. Today is a very significant day after a very long campaign over 30 years, and I want to commend again the Irish Deaf Society and Eddie Redmond and of course Senator Mark Daly and you, the Minister, for bringing the bill to where it is today. It really has been the forefront of a very long struggle. The right to use one's own language is a very important human right that every one of you should have and will have when this bill is passed. And purely because of lack of communication over the years, your community has suffered. Deaf people throughout the years have become one of the most marginalised groups of society in the country, facing barrier after barrier at every stage of your lives, preventing full participation as equal citizens. And when we look back over the research, we see and we have to acknowledge that deaf people have faced higher unemployment rates, lower education attainments, poorer health rates, higher risks of mental health issues, and significant decreased economic mobility. But please God, that is going to end. There are still going to be barriers, there are still going to be battles, but when this bill is passed, I really hope that life will be an awful lot easier for all of you. When legal status is achieved in relation to Irish Sign Language, what is this going to achieve? Well, there's a number of reasons why it's important for us to do that. And from what we can see, there's going to be more legal rights for ISL users, better access to public services through ISL, which is hugely important, better education for deaf children, better third-level education and training for deaf adults, better interpreting quality and monitoring. And there are just 5 reasons why this bill is so incredibly important to all of you and those that you represent. There is no doubt that this bill, when passed, will make a very positive and meaningful difference to the quality of life for Irish Sign Language users, to the 5,000 that use it on a constant basis and the other 40,000 that use it as a means of communication. I commend this bill and I'm proud to stand here today with all of you supporting it. Gorv Mahagut.
Brown.
Thank you. Ceann Comhairle. I'd like to first welcome the many members of the deaf community in the gallery here today on this very historic day. The recognition of the Irish Sign Language for the deaf community bill is a historic day, brought into the Oireachtas by my Fianna Fáil colleague, Senator Mark Daly, back in 2013. It has been a long road, but it shows what can be achieved when we all work together and persevere on an issue of huge importance to our society. This bill provides civil rights for the 50,000 members of the deaf community in Ireland, and also crucially places responsibility on the state to provide for these civil rights. From my own experience as our party's spokesperson on mental health, I know this bill, which puts an onus on the government to provide interpreters in all public services, including hospitals, will all allow members of the deaf community gain the help they may need when suffering from poor mental health. Also, the provision to provide funds to facilitate users of Irish Sign Language with regard to support in relation to access to social and cultural events allows Irish Sign Language users to be a full, unencumbered part of Irish society, which will no doubt help the community with their mental health as well. In my own county of Wexford, I know this will make a huge impact on people's lives, and I would especially like to mention Our Lady of Lourdes School in New Ross, who contacted me earlier this year when doing a project to bring about improvement in areas of social neglect, and had chosen to focus on the provision of services for the deaf and hearing impaired in Ireland. It is through projects like this and the awareness created by the Deaf Community Campaign that has got us this bill today. I am delighted to be able to welcome this bill to the House today and to congratulate the deaf community, the Minister and his officials for his important part in this, and my party colleague Senator Mark Daly and his assistant Grace Coyle on the passage of the recognition of the Irish Sign Language for the deaf community bill. Thank you, Ceann Comhairle.
Deputy Caelan.
My colleague, Deputy O'Leary. At the outset, I have to say that this is an historic day, a day that has been a long time coming for the deaf community in Ireland. Míle Cógáirdeachas to you all for the decades of campaigning, and a special word of thanks to Senator Mark Daly for his great work on this issue. I also commend you, Minister, on your contribution to the introduction of this bill here today for final approval here in the Dáil chamber. Mai Shiv Illig, well done to everyone who has played a part. Sinn Féin have long supported the campaign by the Irish Deaf Society and campaigners for official recognition of ISL, as we have always recognised the importance of Irish Sign Language to the Irish deaf community, to their families and to their friends. We have been fully committed to supporting the passage of ISL recognition legislation, as it is an incredibly important piece of legislation for the rights and entitlements of citizens who are deaf. Irish Sign Language, ISL, is a language of the face, hands and body that has been in existence for hundreds of years and developed from within the deaf community in Ireland. It is one of our two indigenous languages, the other, Gaeilge, being our first official language. It differs from sign languages in other countries. It is unique to Ireland. There are approximately 5,000 deaf people in Ireland who use ISL daily. However, approximately 40,000 hearing people in Ireland use ISL, ranging from regular to occasional usage. The right to use one's language is a human right. Unfortunately, in Ireland, we are accustomed to the mistreatment and lamentable decline of Gaeilge. The failure to officially recognise ISL up until now is another example of this disgraceful treatment of our indigenous languages. Irish Sign Language was formally recognised in the north of Ireland in 2004. The Good Friday Agreement requires equal respect of all rights bestowed in either jurisdiction in both jurisdictions. That equality will now finally be in place for the Irish deaf community with the passage of this legislation. And while we are on the topic of equality and language rights, I feel it is important to mention and to record our support for those campaigning in the north for an Irish Language Act, Act na Gaeilge. Last October, in my capacity as chairperson of the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Justice and Equality, I was honoured to launch a report fully endorsing the need for the formal recognition of ISL. During the course of the hearings on this issue, we heard of the extent to which the deaf community experiences exclusion and isolation through the lack of sign language provision. One witness described that experience as one of extreme marginalisation, and this extends from the personal level right through to interactions with key organs of state, such as the education system, the court service, the health service, and indeed, up to now, including this Parliament, Dáil and Éireann. Those of us blessed with hearing take for granted the most simple of things, like listening to music, hearing our phones ring, watching television, accessing state services and communicating with our health providers. We all recall the infamous storm Ophelia that hit our shores only a number of weeks ago. Those of us with the gift of hearing were provided with 24-hour coverage of the storm's progress. Every effort was made to keep us informed and safe. However, the same consideration was not given to those in the deaf community. It was only when contact was made with the national broadcaster about the fact that the service did not cater for the needs of the deaf community that an interpreter was finally provided. This is just one recent example of how the deaf community are being continuously let down. This bill would see the introduction of statutory targets regarding the accessibility of TV programming, and this is very welcome. In my contribution at the launch of the committee report last year, I made reference to the sad and tragic chapter in the recent story of the deaf community in Ireland and those most seriously impacted among its number. In launching the committee report on the 13th of October in the Leinster House AV room, I dedicated the event to the memory of brothers Daniel and William McCarthy, whose remains were discovered at their Millrose estate home in Bluebell in West Dublin just over a month before the report's launch. Their sad and tragic passing exemplified the need for the formal recognition of Irish Sign Language. And Daniel and William, our message from this chamber today is that you are both still in our thoughts. The passing of this bill will mean that deaf people in Ireland will finally be able to access state services in their own language. It will mean every public body having to devise and implement an action plan to promote the use of sign language within the organisation. It will also permit the use of sign language within the courts. It advocates for the establishment of an Irish Sign Language Council, which would regulate sign language interpreters and teachers. It will make a huge difference in the lives of so many. These are all massive steps forward, and I am delighted to have played my part, however small, in this coming into being.
Deputy O'Leary.
Agus bhfuilm cógádagus arála snear agus gachtainna bhí páirteacha an bille seo a thuairt chun cín. Is bille tábhachtach é seo a thugaigh aitheantas agus éifeacht den teanga agus go tugaigh cúnamh de daoine in úsáid le gníomhíochtaí leis an stáit. As on the last occasion, 12 months ago, we discussed the report which came from the committee, and as on the last occasion, I started in Irish to illustrate a specific point. That is my native language. It's a language which I'm very proud of, a language which I've spoken since I was a child. And despite the complaints that I might have in relation to its status, its promotion, its funding, I know that it is officially recognised in the Constitution. I have the right to use it in our courts and to engage with public services in my native language. Now, the manner in which that can be done is not perfect, and there are many flaws. But I am aware that these are privileges that currently the deaf community in Ireland does not enjoy. And they do not enjoy those privileges and those opportunities in respect of what is their native languages. This bill changes that, and as a result is very welcome. I want to commend the Minister, I want to commend Senator Mark Daly for their work on this, and indeed Grace Coyle, who I know from, actually, it's a small word, I worked with Grace Coyle in a news agent many years ago. I want to commend also Deputy Caoimhin O'Quailán, who made this bill a priority in the Justice Committee and brought forward that report. It is extraordinary that this campaign has taken so long. I believe that it's been arguably 30 years since the campaign since it was first raised by the former MEP Eileen Lamass in the European Parliament. It's extraordinary that it's taken so long to get there, but the greatest congratulations of all is owed to those who have been involved in campaigning, to those many people who are in the public gallery, the Irish Deaf Society. I want to make specific reference to the Cork Deaf Club that I know were very active in canvassing myself and all TDs and senators in Cork City and County. So there are many people in this institution here that deserve to be commended for the passing of what is vitally important legislation, but the greatest congratulations of all is due to you and to your perseverance. The last point I want to make is that this legislation is important in terms of its symbolism, in terms of its recognition, but also must be important in terms of its practical effect.
Thank you.
I'll just finish on this, Ceann Comhairle. Deaf people have been marginalised in terms of employment, in terms of education, in terms of opportunity. It is essential that this legislation will now give equal opportunities in all those areas to the deaf community, and it gives practical effect to the recognition.
Deputy Boyd Barrett, or Deputy Coppinger, is it? Deputy Coppinger.
I'll just take 6 minutes, Ceann Comhairle. First of all, I'd like to welcome the people who are here in the public gallery. You're more than welcome, and I'm sure this is a very important bill for yourselves. I just wanted to start by saying it's the result of years of campaign work and pressure from the deaf community. They're the ones who fight for resources for their own community, for the recognition of the language and the culture. And I'd like to say that the deaf community have experienced many years of discrimination and isolation. The Irish State's education system marginalises their language, and it has resulted in social isolation of the community. Members of the deaf community should be very proud today of their campaign work and their achievement in having the Irish Sign Language recognised as a language. Solidarity will support this bill, but we also believe there have to be far stronger provision for Irish Sign Language as a full official language of the state, with legal obligations on those outside of the public sector as well. And the deaf community, as many other communities, will have to fight as well for the resources to make this recognition a reality. I'm particularly happy to speak on this debate given the important role the deaf village on the Navan Road plays in the life of the constituency that I represent in Dublin West. The deaf village actually forms the boundary of the constituency, with many deaf people living in the area, and links with the local community on the Navan Road as well. Irish Sign Language is an indigenous language to Ireland. The language is something that should be valued as part of the deaf community's culture, but also as Irish culture. Irish Sign Language is used by 5,000 people in the state, but the figure is thought to be much more because of family members and work colleagues who use it at some level, and some estimates are 20 to 50,000 people. There was a dominant view in the 19th century that sign language should be discouraged. The belief was it was a barrier to integration. I think that was a mistaken belief. People were forced to fit into the system, to fit into the education system, rather than the education system fitting with their needs. It's an utterly backward idea. And knowledge of sign language in general, and Irish Sign Language too, is essential for interaction with the wider society. This interaction with education means that the deaf community have often had lower literacy levels than the rest of Irish society. 80% of adults have the literacy levels of an 8 to 9-year-old, a figure for the rest of society being 25%. The resources are not available to the community to fund Irish Sign Language education for their own family. It means the deaf community find it difficult to communicate often with their own family, those closest to them. 71% of deaf people in one survey were unemployed. They're fully capable of working productively, but just cannot hear or have difficulty hearing and use a different language. Interpreters are also difficult to get. There are approximately 60 to 70 interpreters in the state. This has to greatly increase. Compare that state's number to a comparable EU country like Finland. In Finland, there's 500 registered interpreters. The deaf community now need to fight for massive investment to bring about the teachers and interpreters. Grown adults should not have to rely on family members to interpret for them. While Solidarity welcomes the bill, as an achievement of the deaf community, there's also a need to point out we need to keep active to fight for resources. The Irish state has failed that language, and there are no legal obligations on private companies to use the Irish language, despite it being an official language of the state. Similarly could happen with the Irish Sign Language. The deaf community has won this recognition, but they'll need to keep vigilant. Solidarity stands as well for Irish Sign Language to be more than recognised, but to be an official language of the state. That would put the onus then on the state to to provide it and make sure that it's carried through. There should be education of Irish Sign Language in all primary schools, even if it's at a very basic level. This would open up the world of deaf people if there was a widespread knowledge of their language. There should be targets as well for the public services, especially health, education and the Gardaí, to have a certain number of people with the Irish Sign Language knowledge. There should be a legal obligation as well on large private sector companies, for example, banks, supermarkets and utility companies, to have a knowledge of Irish Sign Language among their staff. And I think that's something that will be taken up enthusiastically by a lot of workers, if there was courses and training to do that. I think it would break down so many of the barriers that deaf people face. So, in conclusion, there's important gains here for the deaf community with this bill, and it comes in the context of many minority communities in Ireland actually demanding their rights. We've seen travellers, we've seen the LGBT community, but we obviously need to go much further.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ceann Comhairle. Yeah, the word equality is used a lot in political and public discourse of late, and that is a very positive development. Obviously, the marriage equality referendum was an enormous step forward for the LGBTQ community, and equality was the watchword. But of course, we need to fight for equality because there has been so much inequality that a whole host of groups in Irish society have been denied real equality as citizens in the Republic. That has been true for women, for the LGBT community, and critically for people with disabilities. It is a matter of continued frustration for many of us in this House that Ireland, 11 years after agreeing to ratify the UN Convention on the UN Convention for the Rights of People with Disabilities, that we still have failed to do so. And of course, the deaf community are a community that have for decades been fighting for that recognition of sign language and for full equality as citizens. And it is a shame on our society that to date we have failed to achieve that genuine equality. It is a particular shame that in the period of austerity that in fact deaf services and deaf advocacy groups actually were victims of cuts, as were many people with disabilities and services for those with disabilities. But the struggle of the deaf community has finally paid off, and we've taken a significant, or are today taking a significant step forward with this bill, and Senator Mark Daly deserves commendation for that. But of course, the greatest credit goes to the sign language and deaf community, who have fought so long and so hard for this recognition. So it is in a chamber where often we have to be critical and frustrated, it is good that we can celebrate a positive development in the a step in the direction of equality. The measures in the bill address critical areas where there has not been equality for the deaf community, recognition of Irish Sign Language as a distinct language and culture, the lack of full and equal access to education because of the lack of resources to learn through sign language, lack of access to media communications because there's not enough sign language interpreting in the area of the media, more generally access to public services, all of which this bill addresses, and indeed the need to regulate sign language interpreters and ensure that we have sufficient interpreters in all areas of the public service, in politics, in media and critically in education if we are to move towards equality. All of these things, of course, have to be backed up by the actual resources, but at least having all of these things established in law now begins to put an obligation on the government, on politicians and on the state to ensure that recognition, that equality is something that they are legally bound to try and secure for deaf people. Finally, I think Deputy Coppenger's point about the private sector is an important one. It's a first step for the state and for public services to ensure access and equality, but it is something that should be extended right across society so that in all areas of employment and all engagements with other employers or private sector actors, that equality is there and those resources and services are there as well. So I commend the sign language community and the deaf community, and let's move forward now to the full equality that community deserves.
Thank you very much, Deputy Boyd Barrett. We move now to Deputy Joan Collins, please.
Yes. 3 minutes, Count Call, and Deputy Daly's taken 7 minutes. Just in relation to tonight's debate, I went back over my information I had and all the stuff we had over the last number of years in relation to the campaign by the deaf community in getting the Irish Sign Language recognised. And I found the Irish Deaf Society 10 main reasons why the Irish Sign Language must be recognised by the state as a language of this country. And 1, there are 5,000 deaf people using ISL on a daily basis, an additional 35,000 hearing people. 2, for these regular ISL users, it is an innate and integral part of their personality. 3, ISL is the only natural and fully accessible language for deaf children. It does not hinder any ability to learn how to speak and listen. 4, there is no national register of ISL interpreters and ISL teachers, and furthermore there is no accreditations or monitoring systems. 5, ISL has been in use for centuries despite repressive attempts to destroy the language. 6, service providers such as government bodies are not legally obliged to respect Irish Sign Language. They will translate information but Irish but rarely into ISL. The motion calling for the government to recognise ISL has been passed by more than 40 local authorities. 8, there is no automatic right for deaf people to have an ISL interpreter in the justice system. 9, no deaf child can fully learn Irish Sign Language, and not all teachers are fluent or even qualified in ISL. 10, there is no access for deaf people to emergency or helpline service in ISL. And I think tonight is a really brilliant night for the deaf community to see this actually getting changed tonight in legislation, and I commend Senator Mark Daly on that. But more so, Count Corla, I would ask you to indulge a little bit, because I think every so often we're hearing claps from the gallery here, and I'd like maybe for a few minutes for the deaf community to clap themselves, because it was your campaigning work over the last 30 years that brought this. Well done, well done. So we know what this bill is going to initiate. It's going to allow more access to public services in our education. It's going to be, the state are going to be obliged to provide interpreters in schools, in the broadcasting arena. It's going to allow the deaf community to have interpreters in courts, in the health services. And I think this is just a start. And I'm hoping that from here on in we'll have more money for these, for the community and for the society to bring on into the public and private sector your rights, your equality and your absolute human rights to have your own language.
Thank you very much, Deputy Collins. Deputy Clare Daly, please.
Thanks, Count Corlan. I think it is nice to finish up the year almost on a positive note, and I think, like everybody else, I'm absolutely delighted to see the bill coming before the House tonight. I think there's no doubt about it. There's been a huge number of people who've been campaigning on this issue for such a long time, and it really was a great shame that it was voted down by the previous administration. And I think we should say that there are over 70 million users of sign language worldwide, and after this legislation is passed here today, Ireland will actually be among a very small group of countries that have given legislative recognition to native sign language, and it really makes an incredibly nice change for us to be in the forefront rather than dragging up the rear as we so often are. And I very much welcome also the Minister's announcement regarding the ratification of the UN Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and would urge that that would happen as soon as possible. So there's no doubt about it, this is an historic day, and I very much salute the work of Senator Mark Daly and members of the deaf community. But I think I'd have to say that this issue is bigger than ye as well, because it's not just about the rights of the deaf community to access public services, which should of course be the case, but it's also the right of the hearing community to be able to interact with our brothers and sisters in the deaf community. And from that point of view, while banking this legislation here today, I make absolutely no apologies whatsoever about exercising my prerogative as a legislator to put forward amendments to push this forward further. I know that's not going to be dealt with today, and that's absolutely fine, but I think what I'd say on behalf of my friends who are deaf and other people in the hearing community, the fact that you're recognising Irish Sign Language today, great. We're going to bank that and we're going to build on it, because it's only the start of recognition for people from the deaf community. And I do have, I suppose, some concerns that the issue of the fact that Irish Sign Language is a first language, we should be pronouncing that proudly. It's not just a tool to access public services, it's a first language, and I think it is important that more emphasis is put on that. Deafness is not a disability, it's also a culture. And ISL is a language and a vital part of that culture, and I think most, obviously, but not all, deaf people use ISL as their first language. That wasn't always the case. It was repressed in our school system a long time ago. That did a very great deal of damage and wrong inflicted on deaf people. I think the lack of recognition also had a negative effect in terms of ingraining discrimination against deaf people. So we should be proudly proclaiming today that ISL is an Indigenous language. It's unique to this island. It's not a second language for its users. It's not imposed on them by outside forces. It wasn't invented by an authority or by a government department or by a school curriculum. It was developed in a holistic fashion, and it has evolved through use over generations, just like other spoken languages. It has a grammar, a syntax, colloquialisms, dialects, and like all language, it's regulated by a unique culture and heritage of the geographic area where it comes from. So sign language are not and cannot be, I suppose, an international set of visible signals that can be read universally. So, I mean, I suppose I was surprised by the title of the bill, Recognition of the Irish Sign Language for the Deaf Community, and I'm delighted that the Minister is changing that, because that's too narrow. The whole country needs to recognise sign language, and I'm very glad that the Minister is accepting that point. Everybody, deaf and hearing in our community, should recognise that ISL is a language. There's about, as others have said, 5,000 deaf people in Ireland who use it, but over 40,000 users of ISL, many of whom are hearing. And that's something that we should be encouraging. And that's why we tabled the amendments which have been disallowed later on, to say that all of our children in our education system should be exposed to ISL, so that we can all communicate with each other as brothers and sisters, hearing and deaf in Irish society. I think that would be far preferable. I have tabled an amendment. I'll maybe deal with that later on, because I'm a little bit concerned maybe about aspects, about a narrow approach to ISL as a tool for social services. And I suppose I made this point when we discussed it in the report from the Justice Committee last year. I mean, Section 3.1 refers to the right to use Irish Sign Language as their native language and the corresponding duty on all public bodies to provide ISL. Yes, the bodies do have a duty, but I think we have to say that the language exists regardless of that duty, and we should be giving that a recognition here today as distinct simply from just accessing services, which is obviously critically important, and other deputies have dealt with that issue as well. I think the point is, and as it was raised in the Justice Committee report, to ensure that adequate steps are taken to end the marginalisation being experienced by members of the deaf community, and we as hearing people actually have to step up and recognise that I suppose the language belongs to all of us, and we should be encouraging hearing people to learn and access that language. And I suppose having achieved tonight, or we will in a very short time, the historic phase of recognising ISL as a language, then we need to build on that and ensure that it is incorporated in our education system, in our health system, in all of the services that we provide. I think the report published last year by the Justice Committee did raise of particular importance the issue of a system of registration and regulation of ISL interpreters, deaf interpreters and ISL teachers, and I'm very glad to see that that is introduced in the bill, and hopefully that is something that the Department of Education can also aim for. I think the Department of Education actually is key in this moving forward, so we'll maybe make some points later on, but I just want to say I really welcome the move, congratulate all those involved in this very historic day when at last we give recognition to ISL, and hopefully say that this is only the beginning where the deaf community march forward and claim their right to equality as equal citizens in Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Daly. Now, Deputy Matthew McGrath.
I too am delighted chun chatú agus cúpla focail rá an son an Billishin, and I want to issue a 100 million fáilte na gacht aine in the gallery agus an interpreters it's in press gallery. I am delighted and to see so many people here, and I think it's a timely piece of legislation, and I want to issue my congratulations more those and Shannon Daly and his assistants, and indeed the Senate for dealing with it so expeditiously, and of course the Justice Committee. And thanks to Tara McCraw for coming in this evening and having a good spirited debate here with an emphasis on trying to go forward and trying to achieve a right for all the people that have disabilities, and try and do this unanimously. I can see there's some amendments, but I have a feeling that there's a good feeling about it, and it's going to pass all stages, I hope, and not before time. Because I think, as Pádraig Pearse said, a nation is not a nation without its language, and I certainly agree to that. And I think that it's a shameful denial, has been for so long, that we haven't the ISL recognised, and we haven't the facilities, and we haven't the wherewithal to deal with people who have issues of hearing and are unable to hear. And indeed, I know that some people in here would wish at times they wouldn't be able to hear me, but since Gael including the Count Cora, I say at times. But look, we're nearly in Christmas, and indeed take this opportunity to wish you all a very happy Christmas, you too, Count Cora, and all my colleagues and the staff especially as well. And as I said, I'm delighted to be able, on behalf of the Rural Independents with Deputy Collins, to stand here to support this bill this evening. And as I said, everybody has spoken highly of it, so it's nice to be in unison in one issue. And the right to use one's own language obviously is a basic human right, and we give lip service at times, and we give lip service and we get criticised at times then for reports being published in our national tongue. And I don't make any apology for it. So I don't make any apology, you shouldn't make any apology. And I want to compliment the Deaf Society and all the members for lobbying and keeping the good fight to arrive at this stage, because you shouldn't have to fight for it. We talk about equality, and equality in a lot of areas is neglected, sadly. But as I said, the deaf communities feel a great sense of isolation and neglect, I suppose. None of us know, and I don't want to make little of it, but sometimes we have trouble in our ears or something, and then we're saying we can't hear or whatever, but we have no idea what it's like to be unable to receive and exchange, words as well. So to thank all the, as I said, the interpreters and the people who work with the society as well for their engagement. As I said, it's a right, and they have been discriminated against, and I hope that this legislation, when passed, that there won't be any further delays or prevarication, that it will be expeditiously put through and dealt with. And of course the resources put with it, resources that will be there, and meaningful resources, and support and give the supports to the people who need them. I think all children, as Deputy Daly has said, should certainly in the national schools be encouraged and be able to understand when I go to school, and said the Irish was any bit into us and we rejected it, but it's important that we be all embracing it, that all children in all schools, from the Neenra and the play schools right up to first level and second level and even third level, should have an understanding that we will be able to better understand our friends and understand our colleagues and their rights, and that's very important, that all public bodies then must have an ability, and must have not only an ability but must have an eager awareness and wish and be favourably disposed to assisting and to implementing, the legislation and assisting people with ISL, and at least have a certain cohort in their staff and in their places that they're able to deal with people expeditiously and efficiently. I think they deserve that, and as I said, it's very important that we don't go in here and talk about it and pass the bill and pass it on and neglect it. We must ensure, Minister, with your good self and other ministers, that the money is put behind it, the resources are behind it and there, and it will be implemented and encouraged, and they will be embraced.
Thank you, Corla. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak on this bill this evening, and I commend Senator Mark Daly and his colleagues in the Senate for bringing this bill forward. And I welcome the Deaf Society here today, and you've come in large numbers. I think it's a particularly great day for you, and you deserve this moment. Minister, I am happy to support this bill, which gives legal recognition for its use in legal proceedings and the provision of interpretation into Irish Sign Language by public bodies, and to provide for related matters. As it stands, the Irish Sign Language has no official status in Irish legislation, and this is a vital aim of the Irish Deaf Society to get recognition and upholds the status of ISL in Ireland, particularly in education, where its acquisition as a first language for deaf children is so vital. This bill aims to grant that official recognition, which will benefit 5,000 deaf people in Ireland who use Irish Sign Language as their first language, and approximately 40,000 people in general will communicate in ISL and this bill with their deaf family and friends. It is important that we as a society do our best to integrate all people and communities, be they deaf, blind or other, and this passing of the bill is a vital way to do that. It's unfortunate, from what I hear earlier, that it has taken as long as it has to come to where it is today, and I can see exactly the pain and the suffering and that these people have been experiencing. The same, very similar to the people who have cataracts and who are elderly people mainly, and are suffering, 8,500 people, and have been left without a simple procedure to be carried out in this country. And as I said in my leader's questions the other day, the state would rather see them go blind than to resolve this issue. And that's why there's buses leaving West Cork on Friday to Belfast to resolve that issue, where Denny Healy-Ray and myself have done a lot of work, and my colleagues in the Independent Rural Group. Irish Sign Language is the indigenous language of deaf community and is different to British and American Sign Language, and Ireland as a country have our own unique language, culture and traditions. That is recognised all over the world, so I cannot see why we would not give our own sign language the same recognition. Public bodies like the HSE, educational institutions and state broadcasters should have a responsibility to provide for their deaf customers, as to date they can feel neglected by these services as they do not fulfil their needs in providing a competent person to communicate the Irish Sign Language with them. I also think sign language should be taught in primary schools so that Down syndrome, autism, non-verbal can communicate and feel accepted in our society and not lost in their own world. In the United States, McDonald's staff learned sign language so that the deaf community would feel welcome and normal as they are. How many stroke victims sometimes lose the ability to speak, and if sign language was more widely taught in the community with victims of strokes, locked-in syndrome wouldn't be an issue. If sign language was taught, it would help doctors, hospitals and the wider community. If we can teach foreign languages to be able to communicate with nationalities, why can't we teach sign language to help our own? Just imagine not being able to hear for a day and not being able to communicate as you wish. It is a lot easier to learn when a child is young and it feels natural. To do sign language, many children are deprived of access to quality sign language and risk never reaching the full potential. One child in Cork, soon after being born, doctors realised there was a problem. He didn't have the vital auditory nerves that transmit sound information from his middle ear to his brain. It made him one of the handful of deaf children who cannot benefit from any kind of hearing aid technology. His family was met with a multitude of barriers, but his father knew he was a bright boy, and as a family they needed to knock down the barriers between him and his potential. The family switched their focus squarely to learning Irish Sign Language. This family sent their son to a school 80 kilometres away, showing again further barriers that are put in front of deaf people. But his family did not give up and give up on giving their son every right to achieve his potential that he could achieve. Minister, I hope that you and your government are in a position to accept this very necessary piece of legislation and progress the integration of the Irish deaf community further into our society.
Thank you very much. Now, Deputy Roisin Shortall and Deputy Catherine Martin. Deputy Martin first.
Agad agus an tá an comhaontas glas fíorthas de takeíocht a Horston Villa tábhachtach seo. Dús Ceann Comhairle, I would like to acknowledge and welcome the members of the Irish deaf community, the interpreters and all those present in the gallery who have campaigned for so long for the recognition of Irish Sign Language. I commend Senator Mark Daly, who is with us here today as well, for introducing the recognition of Irish Sign Language for the Deaf Community Bill 2016 in the Seanad, for taking that initiative and running with it and for seeking the support that it needed. And that is why it is before the Dáil here today. This is such an important bill, and today is hugely important today as we take this crucial step in recognising the basic right to communicate of more than 5,000 members of the Irish deaf community. When I was a councillor in Dáil Éireann in 2015, a constituent wrote to me. Her name was Wendy Murray, and she was the then chairperson of the Irish Deaf Community, or the Irish Deaf Society. And she wrote to me to ask me to table a motion in Dáil Éireann, and I was delighted I did that, and it received unanimous support. And just like we have here today, each councillor, one by one, spoke loudly and clearly in support of it. So it is a privilege for me to stand in this House today and speak to the bill which seeks to make that recognition a reality. The Irish Deaf Society has stated that the failure to recognise Irish Sign Language puts the health and well-being of deaf people at risk, as they often struggle to avail of vital health and educational services. Many public and private services, which are taken for granted by so many of us, are inaccessible to deaf people. It is essential that public bodies be required to provide the necessary interpretive services for deaf people. I cannot even begin to contemplate how frustrating it must be for a person who is deaf to have to engage with a public body. simple acts of daily life that I take for granted, such as contacting a local authority or a departmental office, become increasingly frustrating for those who are deaf because there is no one on the other side of the counter who can interpret or communicate with them. Irish Sign Language gives thousands of Irish people the invaluable gift of communication. The Irish Deaf Society has been campaigning for more than 30 years to have Irish Sign Language officially recognised so as to ensure equality for deaf people in society who simply want to secure their right to full participation as citizens of this country. Availability of services and information in the Irish Sign Language as guaranteed by law is the only means of ensuring deaf people will have the opportunity to access and participate fully in society. I welcome this bill before the House today, which seeks to ensure members of the deaf community will be able to participate fully as citizens of this country by legally guaranteeing their rights to access information in what is their first and, for so many, their only language. The Green Party Cointas Glas are happy to support this bill.
Thank you. At the outset, I just want to say congratulations to the Irish Deaf Society. This is a wonderful day for all of you, and it is a day that has come not a bit too soon, because all of you and your families have been campaigning for this day for many, many years, over the last 30 years. And I want to very much welcome the fact that we're now at the point of ensuring that ISL is finally taking its place as a fully recognised language here in Ireland. I want to commend Senator Mark Daly and indeed the Minister for ensuring that we have got to this point. I know Senator Daly has been working with the deaf community over several years, and it really is a wonderful achievement that we have finally got to this day. Irish Sign Language is, as we know, the native language of the Irish deaf community, and it is used by the vast majority of the Irish deaf community and their families and friends. We know that Article 21 and 24 of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities notes the importance of recognition and the need for the state to facilitate the learning of sign language and the promotion of the linguistic identity of our deaf community. The recognition is a very important step towards wider society, realising that ISL isn't a tool used to overcome a disability. It is an integral part of the unique linguistic and cultural identity shared by the deaf community. I think I'm probably the only member of the Oireachtas that holds a diploma for teachers of the deaf. I am fully recognised officially as being qualified to teach the deaf. But I have to say that that's not the case. I qualified many years ago, long before I came into this House, and I did the official diploma for teachers of the deaf in UCD. And incredibly, there was no element whatsoever of sign language in that training course. And when I started teaching in the School for the Deaf in Cabra, St. Joseph's in Cabra, corporal punishment had just been recently outlawed. But up to then, children in those schools were actually slapped if they were caught signing. And during my time there, which isn't, 100 years ago, during my time there were notices all over the school telling the students that if they were caught signing, they would be fined. And I mean, that was just an incredibly backward attitude to have to what is a native language for our deaf community. I call it backward, and I do that at this point with the benefit of hindsight, because the thinking was very, very different in those days. There was a sense that if we concentrated on oralism, that deaf people would learn to speak and communicate orally, and that if people started using signs that they would never become oral. And of course, that was to misunderstand the situation entirely. And, you know, more enlightened thinking came about in the 80s and 90s, and it is only that recently. There's more enlightened thinking that multiple communication was what it was about. But it also took a long time for people to officially recognise Irish Sign Language as opposed to signed English. And when progress started to be made in the late 80s and 90s about signing, and signing became more accepted, I suppose, in society generally, people used to talk about signing English. And of course, that's not what deaf people use. Deaf people don't just sign English. They use their own native language, which is Irish Sign Language. And there's an important distinction there. I would also say that in this legislation, I'm not satisfied that there's sufficient emphasis put on ensuring that teachers are adequately trained in Irish Sign Language. I know that there isn't currently an existing training course for teachers of the deaf, and that most training is done in Manchester and in Birmingham. But, you know, I don't see why we don't have our own training course back here again. And I don't see also why we're not insisting on upskilling courses, in-service courses in Irish Sign Language for teachers who are currently working with the deaf. I think that's really important. So, look, the point I would make is that the bill proposes to establish training opportunities organised by the Department of Education for parents, for people working with deaf people and so on, for guardians and siblings, and that's really important. The lack of provision of signing is an invisible but very significant barrier to accessing basic state services. And I note that the National Disability Inclusion Strategy of 2017 to 21 includes commitments to extend remote interpretation service and the establishment of quality assurance and registration. But I do think we need to go further than where the bill is going at the moment. And certainly when it comes to things like access to medical care, for example, you know, the stresses of accessing care in a medical situation are significant enough. And that's why it's really important that interpreting services are available for that as well, in the same way as they are available for court appearances. So we're very under-resourced at the moment in regard to the provision of signing and the provision of ISL interpreters. And we need to take a significant step forward in terms of significantly increasing those numbers. So just in conclusion then, I want to say I very warmly welcome the bill before us. It is a testament to the tireless campaigning that has gone on by the deaf community over so many years. It's a positive step forward, but it is only the first step. And I hope it represents a move towards continued engagement with the deaf community as equal citizens and ongoing development of ISL throughout the community.
Thank you,
Ceann Comhairle.
Thank you, Deputy, and thank you for that valuable insight. Deputy Micheál Martin, you want to make a contribution, I think, before I call the Minister to respond.
I appreciate the opportunity, if I could. And I just, on my own behalf, want to thank the Irish deaf community for the outstanding work and effort and pursuit of this agenda over many years, and in particular to thank Senator Mark Daly, who has been very tenacious and meticulous in advancing this legislation. And indeed, I met with Mark and the representatives of the deaf community and those who were advising the bill last year to try and chart a pathway forward and to make it clear that we were resolutely in support of this. And to say that the cultural impact of the passage of this legislation will be profound on public bodies and on public institutions. That's the important point of this legislation. Not just the legal provision, but the cultural change it will usher in. And I can recall a primary school in Cork, St. Columba's, in Douglas, where many children with hearing impairment were educated and were amalgamated with a mainstream school. And what was wonderful was every child in the school had sign language. And that is the sort of template that one should aspire to, and it was done with great ease and dignity. And so that cultural impact is very, very important. The interpretation dimension of the legislation is critical, and therefore that calls into need the importance of training for those who can become interpreters, and good quality interpreters as well. And that is an essential component part of the bill, and I welcome that aspect of it. And also the review section, because it is very important as we pass legislation that we can, in a timely manner, reflect on how it is being implemented, and that it is having practical benefits and improvement and witnesses improvements and advancements in terms of sign language and in terms of both training, interpretation, utilisation, both in our courts and by our public bodies, so that it becomes a habitual occurrence, not something that has to be continually asked for and indeed sought. And so, as a person who brought in the Education Act of 1998, we referenced sign language in that Act actually back then in the context of the Education Act, so I'm very conscious of the need for full implementation. Congratulations to everybody involved. I thank the Minister for his accommodation, and in particular Senator Mark Daly for seeing this through, please God, both houses of the Oireachtas.
Thank you very much. Minister.
First of all, can I thank all the members for their contributions, and can I say as well that I value your suggestions, I value your ideas, and I value the whole debate about equality and the issue about citizens of the state getting equality and demanding equality. But there are two things that stuck out to me. First of all, Deputy Claire Daly said, when she used the words bank and build. We have to bank on this piece of legislation, but we have a lot of building to do in the future as well as regards putting services in place for the deaf community. So I totally accept that argument. But also it's important what Caoimhín Quillan said in relation to congratulating and commending. He said, well done everybody. And when I say everybody, I mean all of my colleagues right across the House and the members of the deaf community for working together, and particularly for Mark Daly. And it was difficult. There were difficult negotiations. There were a couple of rows, but we got over them in the interest of the deaf community. But to go back to the issue again, we have to bank and build. Can I just say one other thing as well, Cancora, in relation, because it came up during the debate. I want to mention before we go on to the committee stage that I'm delighted that the Government has decided to proceed with the ratification of the UN Convention for the Rights of People with Disabilities, because this bill is part of that process. And we are putting legislation in place. The precise timetable for the ratification and sequence of events will become clearer, by the way, and we will bring the detailed process back to Government, and the formal process will begin early in the new year. A Dáil motion, by the way, has to be passed under Article 29(5)(2) of the Constitution, and which says that the state shall not be bound by any international agreement involving a charge upon public funds unless the terms of the agreement shall have been approved by Dáil Éireann. So I want to appreciate the support today, and likewise I will appreciate your support when this motion becomes before the Dáil. But as I said, I want to thank you all for your suggestions. This is a very important issue, and it's a very important civil rights issue. But the issue as well, as I say to you, is rights and the rights to have an Irish Sign Language recognised. But rights as citizens are very, very important. But you also have to have services to back up those rights. And we'll say today it's part of that debate, it's part of that process. The 10 million the other day for the extra money going into respite care was another part of the process. So what I'm saying is we're building steps in the right direction. And again, I want to thank all of my colleagues for the great support. And once again, I want to thank my colleague Mark Daly for his magnificent work on this piece of legislation. Thank you, Concordia.
Thank you very much, Minister. Can I say as well that it's a great privilege to be presiding here on an historic day like today. And just in relation to Mark Daly and the inimitable Grace who works with him, from Mark's point of view, the only time I've heard public representatives acknowledged in the way that he has been today is when they've passed away. So it's very good to see somebody recognised during his own lifetime. Can I take it now? Can I take it now that the second stage reading is agreed unanimously? Agreed unanimously. That means we must ask you now, Minister, when is it proposed to take committee stage?
We'll take committee stage now.
Is that agreed that we take it now? Okay, we'll move straight into committee stage. We look at section 1. Section 1, Amendment 1 is in the name of the Minister. 1 to 7 inclusive and 12 to 17 inclusive are related and will be discussed together. Minister to move.
Thank you. Cairn I move. In addition to the substantive amendment we have before us, the Office of Parliamentary Counsel has advised that a number of technical amendments shall be made to the bill as passed by the Seanad. The amendments are as follows. Amendment number 1, the reinsertion of a concise definition of Irish Sign Language into the bill. The Attorney General's Office has advised me that this would be a useful inclusion in the bill. Amendments numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 and 9, updating the reference to the Companies Act and making a typographical changes elsewhere in section 1, 2 and section 5. Amendments number 6 and 14, moving a regulation making power, adding new public bodies from section 2 definitions to a substantive section of the bill, section 6. The OPC advised that this is the proper approach to creation of a regulation making power rather than have it in a definition section. Amendments 12 and 13. Amendment number 12 tightens up the wording of section 6, subsection 1 to ensure that all services provided by a public body are covered by the bill. Amendment number 13 is a technical recasting of Section 6, Section 3, regulations in relation to the notice to be given by a user of Irish Sign Language seeking to avail of free interpretation services and ancillary matters. Amendment number 16 is an internal reorganisation of Section 9, review of the Act, essentially renumbering the various clauses that follow subsection 1. And finally, Amendment number 17, changing the name of the bill to Irish Sign Language Act 2017 as a crisper and more user-friendly short title. Thank you. I commend amendment number 1.
Yeah. Okay. We were including as well amendment number 9 in that group of amendments. Is there anyone seeking to make a contribution on these amendments, or are they brief? Yes, Deputy O'Connell.
Welcoming the amendments as tabled. They are, as the Minister has indicated, technical in nature. They don't in any way divert the proposition, the propositions at the core of the bill from their intended course. So I record accepting.
Thank you very much. Deputy Michael Fitzmaurice and then Deputy Margaret.
First of all, I want to agree with the amendments and I congratulate the Minister and indeed Mark Daly on first of all the government on accepting it and the good work that has been done in the Seanad. It will make a huge difference to a lot of people, and well done for everyone that has turned out here tonight. And I see actually neighbours of my own here. I want to give a special mention to them. I think it is great for once in the Dáil to see, and especially at Christmas time, to see us all doing something together, working together, and that there isn't people opposing things like usually goes on here in the rows. And to everyone, I congratulate them in this. I think to make sure that it's delivered, and I also think in education in national schools we need to start and make sure that everyone gets the chance in this country, from be it a creche right up along, because at a young age we can learn a lot of these things. We can learn how to sign, we can what a young child takes in. It's great, and I think, Minister, first of all, well done on accepting it. I know you have amendments put in, and I don't think there's much objection to any of the amendments you have put in, because I think it actually makes the bill better. So, Cormac.
Thank you, Deputy Murphy-O'Mahony.
Minister, in relation to Amendment 17 on Section 10, the amendment to shorten the title of the bill, unfortunately, we cannot support this, and I really implore you on this very special day, Minister, not to push this amendment. The title of the bill is of great importance to the deaf community, and keeping the work recognition shows the symbolic and significant nature of this bill and indeed of this day. You have been a great advocate yourself and an active minister on this issue, and I really would ask you that this amendment would not be moved, and to keep the title as Recognition of the Irish Sign Language Bill 2017. Please, Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Minister McHugh first, maybe.
Oh, sorry, Minister McHugh first.
Minister McHugh on the generality of matters.
Focal Cam Corla, Boil on my hand as a goal, Higgin Bella Howard Hackiocht Nahiran, agus Boil on my hand as August McQuarges a goal, Hig and Shanador, Mark Daly, August McColakia, Chakta, now Splach, Fanny McGrath, August Fohanian Coabru. Neil Virginia ag trudge Achanla sa Shaw, agus Shaw last Darul, agus Antim let the Hurm Shahin, Cam Corla, agus Boil on my hand as a goal, Higna Denjaveg, Ober and Ashterhan in New Foster, agus Falcher Rove, a Daniel Leg Foster, agus Uncle Person. Trí bliana hen ní ró mé abalta Lords le chéile le duine ag Lords Fridge Gaeilge imi fariste héan. Ní ró mé abalta tuigim an táhacht fuidir a bheith sibse abalta Lords Fridge do hanga héan agus tá sé har a bheith táhachta last darúil a ríis agus má chláirges agus má buías a ggóil achan duine a bheith gobar le chéile ar somna duine sus an staire agus tífamí agus Champel and Cheer Foster Goramila.
Minister?
Yeah, in relation to, first of all, can I thank the comments as well from all deputies, but in relation to amendment number 17, as I mentioned earlier on, the changing of the name of the bill to the Irish Sign Language 2017 as a crisper and more user-friendly short title, I would stress that the recognition of Irish Sign Language is still explicit in the bill's long title, and it would be useful to have a citation for a bill that people will use and which does not have to be abbreviated further in ordinary speech. As the House will note, the long title of the bill is an act to provide for the recognition of Irish Sign Language, and this amendment does not take away from that, but it does provide a shorter citation that people will use in practice. Now, that's my personal view. The current title is a long one, which people will practice abbreviate. However, you know, I always listen to Deputy Margaret Murphy O'Mahony when it comes to these contributions, and I have listened very carefully to my other deputies and our views, and I listen to her regularly on other issues as well in relation to service people with disabilities. But having said that, this isn't something on which to divide, and I won't press the amendment in view of your strong views expressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. The deaf community should possibly come to visit us more often if such unanimity can be made to break out. Minister, can I put amendment number 1 then to the House? I take it the amendment number 1 is being pressed?
Pressed, yeah.
How stands the amendment? Is the amendment agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Amendment number 2. In the name of the Minister, it is already discussed with 1. Is amendment number 2 being pressed, Minister? It is. Is it agreed?
Agreed.
Amendment agreed. Amendment number 3, is that being pressed?
Yes.
Yes. Is the amendment number 3 agreed?
Yes.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Amendment number 4. Minister, you're pressing agreed. Amendment 4. Is amendment number 4 agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Amendment number 5. Already discussed with 1. Minister, agreed. You're pressing. Yes. Is the amendment agreed? Amendment is agreed. Amendment number 6 in the name of the Minister was also discussed with number 1. Minister, are you pressing?
Yes.
Is the amendment being agreed?
Agreed.
Is it therefore agreed that section 1 as amended stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Section 2, amendment number 7 was already discussed with 1. Minister, how stands amendment 7?
Pressed.
It's being pressed. Agreed. Amendment number 7 agreed?
Agreed.
Is it agreed, therefore, that section 2, as amended, stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
It is agreed. Thank you very much. Section 3, amendment number 8 is in the name of Deputy Claire Daly. Deputy Daly?
Thanks very much, Councillor. I suppose since this was my only motion that wasn't ruled out of order, I'll make some points to some of the rest of them as well. And I do note that over the last number of days, I don't know if somebody was engaged in mischief or what was going on in terms of a reaction to me tabling amendments to this bill. Not sure who started it or where. There was a suggestion maybe that some of the civil servants had a problem with us tabling amendments, which, given that I'm fully aware of the detailed work that went on behind the scenes through the offices of Mark Daly, through representatives of the deaf community, with the civil servants in preparing this bill. That's their democratic right, and they had a very keen and diligent input in that process. But it is our democratic right and responsibility as deputies in this House to use the democratic methods we have to table amendments to try and improve legislation if we think that we can do that. And there was never any doubt that the tabling of these amendments was going to scupper anything, undermine anything, take from the glory of Mark Daly or anybody else in this. It was simply to highlight a number of issues which we felt needed to be highlighted. And I'd just like to put on the record that I make absolutely no apologies for that whatsoever, because while recognising the rights of everybody in this process, I want to state the rights of everybody outside this process. The deaf community who weren't at those talks and the hearing community as well. This is an issue for everybody, and if we're serious about it, we'll all take a responsibility for it. So this amendment here is a very simple amendment. It's dealing with section 3.1 of the bill. As it presently reads, it says the right to use Irish Sign Language as their native language and the corresponding duty on all public bodies to provide Irish Sign Language. Very important that that is accommodated. What my amendment simply seeks to do is recognise the fact that ISL is more than that. It's not just a vehicle for accessing, it's a language in its own right with a cultural recognition that needs to be established. So instead of saying corresponding duty just for the sake of it, I'm putting in or suggesting which is an indigenous language in its own right, used by a sizeable minority in the state, and the duty then goes on to provide in terms of public bodies to provide ISL, because I think it puts it in its important cultural context, and that's why we're moving it, because this issue is bigger than just access to services. And I will, because my other amendments have been moved out of order and I won't take the time later on, I would say if we're serious about this, and the suggestion was made to me actually by one of the ushers on the way in, where he said, and as we know, there's a very good programme running in Trinity College at the moment in terms of sign language. My own staff, some of them, are signed up to do that course in the new year. I think it's very good, but one of the ushers suggested that the ushers in the House, or members of this House now, should be encouraged and funded to take up that scheme in order that they can provide the types of services that the deaf community deserve to be part of this process. So if we're really serious, I'd like to see measures like that coming on. My other amendments later on deal with opening up the education system, access to the broader hearing community to be involved in sign language. So I'm putting that forward as a suggestion now in terms of the operation of this House, and that's something that the Minister could maybe take up, because it won't be addressed later on. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Deputy Daly. Anyone else on this particular matter? Deputy Quaylon? Yeah, okay, Minister.
First of all, can I say, I'm aware that some of your other amendments were ruled out of order, but can I also give a commitment that it had nothing to do with me? Some of the points that you raised there are my civil servants. They've reassured me of that. But can I say in relation to Amendment number 8, I think making a clear linkage between the recognition of Irish Sign Language and of the right of users to free interpretation is a positive thing, and therefore I don't see the advantage of removing the word correspondent. I'm not sure why the Deputy is making that proposal. I think this link is a good idea and should be retained in the bill. In relation to the second part of the amendment, I am advised that it's unnecessary. It can be taken as a statement of fact, and certainly it contains nothing that I would object to, but it doesn't contain any new obligation or duty on anyone or confer any new rights. Words in legislation, and this is the advice my department has received from the Attorney General's office, words in legislation should in layman's language have a job to do, should mean something in terms of clarifying a process or creating a duty or a right. This text doesn't do that and is therefore unnecessary. In light of the advice I've received, perhaps, Deputy Clare Daly, you might will agree not to press the amendment, but that's just a request. Thank you.
Deputy Daly and then Deputy Quaylon. Do you want to comment? No? No, Deputy Quaylon.
Yes, well, I note the Minister's reference to superfluous language in terms of drafting legislation. I have to say, over all these years here, I thought I've noted quite a lot of it myself. But that aside, I think that Deputy Daly's amendment makes an important point, and it's a statement of fact. Primarily, it's a statement of fact. And I have to say that I wanted to acknowledge that, and I want to say I'm disappointed that there was any pressure on Deputy Daly in terms of her work and diligence and attention to the bill in terms of presenting here today. I do believe that there's merit in it, and I just want to record so and to say well done on all your work, and very particularly in relation to this bill. I'm sure that Deputy Daly will make an appropriate call as to whether or not she wishes to press, and that's her prerogative and prerogative only. But I only wanted to make that point because I think it's not superfluous language. I happen to concur.
Okay. Deputy Margaret Murphy-O'Mahony.
Deputy Daly, I note your amendment, and I am aware that you have been a supporter of the deaf community and indeed an advocate for the Irish Sign Language. However, this process of amendment has been discussed and collaborated and linked with my party colleague, Senator Mark Daly, and the Irish Deaf Society, members of the deaf community and the Minister and his officials, and we cannot support the amendment put forward by you at this stage.
Sorry, just to contribute on this. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes here, and I don't like it, I have to say. You know, this is a very important bill. A lot of work has gone into it, and there's been a lot of consultation, and that's very much welcomed. But at the same time, we are legislators here, and when it comes to finalising a new law, a piece of legislation, I think it's important that everybody is given a hearing on that. And I think the proposal, the motion proposed by Deputy Daly strengthens the bill. I don't see any reason why the Minister wouldn't accept that wording. It's making a statement of fact about ISL being an indigenous language in its own right, used by a sizeable minority in the state. And I think it's important to state that fact. And it does strengthen it and recognises it further, not just as a native language, but as an indigenous language used by a great number of people. It's not just a small minority thing. So I think that's a welcome proposal. I would be concerned that, you know, there seems to be a lot of tick-tacking between Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil on this, to the point where it seems to be excluding other people in terms of having an input into this important bill. And I think Deputy Daly's contribution should be listened to properly, should be considered, and personally I would very much welcome it.
An awful pity if we had any discordant approach on this. Can I just say, I was not aware until I came to the chamber here that there was a problem with amendments. 3 of Deputy Daly's amendments were ruled out of order on the advice of the people who normally process these, and they were ruled out of order because they were considered to be a potential charge on the revenue. And there's a constitutional prohibition, as you all know, on legislators other than members of the government coming forward with anything that imposes a charge. So I certainly was not aware of anything untoward, exceptional, different or extraordinary in terms of how these matters were dealt with. I know that very often people who have their amendments ruled out of order are very unhappy, but I'm afraid there isn't much I can do about that. Deputy Howland, you wanted to come in.
I just wanted to, I came to the chamber to express my very strong support for this legislation. Unfortunately, as it happens in these houses, that other committees and other demands don't offer all of us the opportunity to be present at all debates. But I'm very supportive, of the Labour Party is very supportive of this measure, and I want to commend Senator Daly and all those who are involved. But this is a House of Legislature. I think that the recognition of Irish Sign Language as a unique language in its own accord is a very important advance, and I would intrinsically support the amendment in that regard. In my own constituency office in Wexford, I share premises with the People's College, and the People's College run a number of courses, but one of the the best attended courses is to teach Irish Sign Language, both beginners and more advanced. And it's something I think that all of us have to pay more attention to ensure that people who are deaf can participate fully in all state services, including in communicating with members of the Oireachtas in our own constituencies settings. So I hope, and I certainly won't be discordant in my contribution, that what is intended in this amendment can be accepted. And I just want to express the strong support of my party for the thrust of the bill and all the work done by the Minister of State, done by the proposers in the Seanad and here of this legislation, and indeed by the Irish Deaf Society and all their members in advancing, I think, a very important fundamental right for them.
Deputy Daly.
I'd like to thank the other deputies who contributed. I'd like to first of all say that my points were in no way a reflection of any decision by the Count Corla's office or the ruling out of order. I understand fully how that process works, and I fully accept it. It was more to do with the fact that because there has been such a lot of, I suppose, dedicated and hands-on work behind the scenes in preparation for bringing this bill here between representatives of the deaf community and the civil service, that there was maybe a feeling that anybody else who kind of made suggestions outside of that wasn't to be welcomed. And I would reiterate the points by Deputy Shortall. Our job here as legislators is to try and improve legislation where we see fit, and we, in fairness, in the Justice Committee have been really trying to push this and are very keen to see it through. So look, I'm not going to repeat the points. It's very self-evident to me, and I raised this point when we discussed the report from the Justice Committee last year. Public bodies do have a duty to provide Irish Sign Language, but the language exists regardless of that duty, and that should be recognised as such without being directly linked to a service approach. They're actually two separate things, and they should be two separate sentences. That's all I'm seeking to do. They are statements of fact. They're not actually superfluous at all. We don't treat other languages in such a narrow terms. We don't connect the use of Irish or English with connecting public services. We automatically understand that people have a right to use those languages in their own right, and that's all that this amendment seeks to do. And the point is, as was raised at the Justice Committee, is to ensure that adequate steps are taken to end the extreme marginalisation of people in the deaf community, and that's a responsibility for us in the hearing community who weren't necessarily involved in the backroom talks on this. So I, echo the points made by my colleagues, and I think it is a point of fact and it can be contained. I don't see what the problem is.
Mr. Comes-in, I just want to remind the House that it's the order of the House that in 7 minutes I will be putting one question, and it's the first time I think I've done this, but in a sense it's guillotine, but I think it's in the interest of getting the bill passed. So, Minister, your response to
Amendment number 8.
Amendment number 8.
Yeah, just a couple of points. First of all, can I just reassure people that there were a lot of discussions going on, but at the same time, there was nothing untold going on behind the scenes, as some people have said. And of course, I do respect your democratic right to bring forward amendments. But can I say that, and I do take on board a lot of the suggestions you've said, and I would be very supportive of the lot of suggestions you said. So I just want to reassure that. But in relation to the debate about this particular amendment, it is recognised in amendment number 1. I think that's an important thing to say that. But the other issue what I'd say as well is that from my point of view, I'm trying to get the legislation through with the cooperation of all of yourselves, and I would ask you not to press the amendment. That's my personal view at the moment. Thank you.
Where stands amendment number 8?
Yeah, I'd like to move it, Chair.
You move. It should have a wawer abadis tar. It should have a gunya abadis neil. Sheelam and Kesh Kalcha. The question is lost. Section 3, stand part of the bill. Agreed. Section 4, stand part of the bill. Agreed. Section 5, Amendment 9, in the name of the IRA, to move.
To move. So just move.
Agreed. Section 10, out of order. Section 11, potential charge. Section 5, stand part of the bill. Section 6, Amendment 11, potential charge. Out of order.
Section 5 is amended.
Amended. Oh yeah, they accepted that. Section 5 is amended. Agreed. Section 6, Amendment 11, Deputy Daly, out of order. Number 12, the Minister to move the amendment.
I move.
Agreed. Number 13 has already been discussed with one. Minister to move. Minister to move. Agreed. So number 14, which is still Section 5 or Section 6, already discussed with one. Is that agreed? Agreed. Is moved. Move, Minister. Move 14.
I move.
Agreed. Section 6 as amended, stand part of the bill. Agreed. Section 7, stand part of the bill. Agreed. Section 8, stand part of the bill. Agreed. Section 9, already discussed with one. The Minister to, Section Amendment 15, the Minister to move.
I move.
Agreed. Number 16, it's a new section already discussed with one, that the section be inserted. The Minister to move.
I move.
Section 9 to be deleted from the bill. Section 10, the Minister to move.
I move.
Already. Section 9 to be is deleted from the bill. Agreed. Agreed. Amendment 17, Section 10, already discussed, that the amendment be made. Minister to move. Minister to move.
All right, that's okay, isn't it?
Minister.
I move.
Agreed. So Section 10, Amendment 18, which is a potential charge. So that Section 10 is amended, stand part of the bill.
Agreed.
That this be the title to the bill, an act to provide for the recognition of Irish Sign Language, its use in legal proceedings and the provision of interpretation into Irish Sign Language by public bodies, and to provide for related matters. Is that agreed? So, to conclude after 13 minutes. The bill is reported without amendments, so order for report stage. Minister, when is it proposed to take report stage?
No.
Okay. Since there are no amendments on report stage, we proceed to the order for fifth stage. Order for fifth stage, Minister, when is it proposed to take the fifth stage?
Tomorrow, is it?
Minister. Agreed. So, and ask the Minister to move. The Minister to move that the bill do now pass.
I move.
So the question is that agreed? Agreed. So a message. So now, it's not usual, but you're very welcome, and you're very welcome to interrupt proceedings because it's an historic bill. So now, a message will be sent to the Seanad, acquainting it accordingly. That's it. Thank you for all your cooperation, and we're to finish at 7:15 for a guillotine, but we didn't need it. Thanks for your cooperation. Now.